Many people around the world still believe that Christian persecution is a problem of the past. They assume it ended centuries ago, yet the reality is very different. In many nations today, Christians are being threatened, attacked, silenced, and even unalive for their faith. Families are displaced, churches are burned, pastors are imprisoned. However, much of the Western media either ignores this reality or downplays it.
Well, the sub-Saharan region of Africa is one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a Christian, particularly the nation of Nigeria. According to the Nigerian-based NGO International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law. Well, since 2009, 125,000 Christians have been killed in Nigeria, including 600 clerics. 19,000 churches have been destroyed, 1,100 Christian communities displaced. Sunday, November 2nd, is the National Day of Prayer for the Persecuted Church, when churches around the world pray for their suffering brothers and sisters.
Of this year, 280 Christians were slaughtered. Half of them were burned alive. The other ones that weren't burned alive were shot and macheted to death, escaping being burned alive.
The conclusion from this is that before Jesus comes again, we're going to see an upsurge of demonically inspired violence like we've never seen in human history. And so we need to take this seriously, because we are now targets as Christians. And if you follow the news, you'll know that in places like Nigeria, almost every week, 50, 100, 200 Christians are being killed. When I say killed, they're being macheted and their villages are being burnt down on their heads as they sleep at night. And the media portrays it as a clash over grazing rights. The reality is these are Fulani jihadists coming from the north, killing the Christian tribesmen of the south.
Some nations have been identified as countries of particular concern, which means there is proven, ongoing, and severe persecution of believers. Yet, even among those nations, some governments deny these accusations. They claim that Christians are exaggerating, that the reports are false, or that these events are isolated. But the evidence is overwhelming.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria.
Tell Trump to save our life. They are Christians in Nigeria.
Are those facing persecution in Nigeria mainly Christians?
Absolutely not.
Eyewitness accounts, video recordings, local reports, and independent investigations confirm that this persecution is real and growing.
Nigeria is responsible for 90% of all Christian persecution deaths worldwide in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
And no one hears about it. No one's talking about it.
Recently, President Donald Trump highlighted Nigeria as one of these major hotspots. In parts of Nigeria, entire Christian villages have been wiped out.
Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. That's a legal definition. When the Christians or any such group is slaughtered, like is happening in Nigeria, 3,100 versus 4,476 worldwide. What horrible numbers. Something has to be done.
There has been a lot of talk here recently, and even some of this being pushed forward by the Nigerian government, trying to say that the violence is not religiously motivated, that is not a factor. It is a complicated situation there. Nobody doubts that. Nobody debates that. There are multiple things that come into play. But one of the things that is certain is that motivation to harm and to kill Christians has certainly been a driving factor in many of these actions that we're seeing.
Churches are burned. People are targeted simply for worshiping Christ. This is not a rumor. This is not propaganda. It is happening in real time. Dr. Conrad Vine, who served for many years as the president of Adventist Frontier Missions, has personally worked on the ground in regions where Christian persecution is a daily reality.
So the
There is a lot of persecution going on these days, and I think it's important that we educate ourselves as Christians. If you look at the United States State Department, they actually have the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. It's uscirf.gov. And the mission of the United States State Department Commission on International Religious Freedom is to advance international freedom of religion by independently assessing and confronting threats to this fundamental right. And they produce an annual report. And this is a superb document produced by the US federal government that lists persecution happening around the world, country by country, on an annual basis. And when you read one report, you're kind of horrified. You realize that persecution on religious grounds is actually increasing around the world today. Despite all the talk of tolerance and mutual respect, we're seeing a marked decrease in tolerance and mutual respect in many different countries. And when you read 3 or 4 reports in a row from, let's say, the last 10 years, you'll realize that persecution on the grounds of religion is increasing around the world. So some persecution comes because you have godless rulers, such as Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and they're imposing a godless atheist ideology on their society, and they want to eliminate all faith, not just Christian faith. And so that's when they do their persecution, they're aiming at all religious belief, because that's inconsistent with the claims of the state upon the citizens. And then you also have persecution by governments who are driven by a sectarian or a religious agenda. We find that most commonly these days in parts of the Muslim world, where there are different levels of hostility and persecution towards Christians. So you find some countries where Sharia law is the law of the land, such as Saudi Arabia or Morocco. And you find in those countries that there may be some tolerance for Christians based on the Sharia law, but there is Christians are very much second-class citizens. Then you also have persecution by non-state actors, and you also find that in parts of the world that may be in say some Buddhist countries, where the government will turn a blind eye to violence by street actors, by mobs, and by clerics whipping up mobs to attack Christians. And you also find that in the Muslim world, where you find governments may sometimes turn a blind eye to the persecution of Christians by extremists within their own nations. And so, for instance, Egypt is a good example, where the Egyptian government does officially try to protect Christians and all religious minorities, but that doesn't prevent that government protection doesn't prevent regular attacks on the Coptic community, and bombings and kidnappings and forced marriages and so forth. So persecution takes place from a variety of sides. You also have groups such as Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab in the Horn of Africa that will explicitly attack Christians because they are Christians, and they want to eliminate those Christians. So there are a variety of reasons why persecution takes place. And then here in the West, over the last 15 years, particularly from the time of President Barack Obama onwards, we have seen an increasing hostility to people with a biblical worldview in the public sector and also in the corporate sector. And it's not just in the United States, it's in all across the West. Wherever cultural Marxism has taken root, there comes with it a concomitant hostility towards Christians, and particularly our understanding of human morality and human sexuality and marriage.
The persecution of Christians and even of other faith groups is complex and takes many different forms. It's not always the same in every country, and we must think about it in those practical terms. However, to deny that it is happening at all is to ignore the very real pain and fear of those who are suffering right now. Some ask, is there any evidence? Are these claims real? The answer is yes. Pastor Judd Saul, founder of Equipping the Persecuted, has been serving directly in regions where Christians are under attack. He has seen burned churches, families displaced, and believers forced to worship in hiding. In a recent conversation with Pastor James Winger, He spoke plainly about what he has witnessed: real persecution, real suffering, and real faith under fire. This is undeniable at this point.
To show you is a video of a gal named Alice who lost her husband, 2 of her children in an attack. And I'm going to share the video right now, and I'll talk more about it in a second. So this is Alice. Her hand was chopped off. She suffered machete wound to her head and to her other hand and her leg.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
So Alice lost her husband, 2 of her children in an attack. They chopped off her hand. She suffered multiple machete wounds, was left for dead. And I'm going to share this right now. This is her son, Godlove, who survived multiple machete attacks. This is her only child that survived. And we came in and we come alongside and we paid for all the medical bills to help her and her son recover. And thank God they're both in much better shape and in better health now. But this is this is just one of the few examples, or one of many examples, I'm sorry to say, one of many examples that we do as a mission is we help people like Godlove and Alice that suffer these attacks. So far to date, we've helped over 1,200 people pay for their medical costs and their surgeries after being wounded.
Oh, man. It's so heavy, and this is just one family and what they've gone through.
This is just one family, and we've helped cover the cost of over 1,200 victims. And these are children with bullet wounds, children that have had machete wounds, that have lost limbs, mothers who've witnessed, their entire family be killed in front of them, brothers and children that are alive that watch their parents and siblings die. And these are the people that we help. This is what Equipping the Persecuted does, is come alongside people like this. And this is every week. This is every week, Mike. Every week our team is dealing with this.
The real question becomes, why is it that we hear so little about this in Western news media? Why is something so widespread, so documented, so devastating, treated as if it hardly exists? Even Bill Maher, an openly atheist commentator, raised this same concern. He may not share our faith, but he has enough common sense to recognize the contradiction.
Nigeria, I mean, the fact that this issue has not gotten on people's radar.
Right, no one's talking about it.
It's pretty amazing. If you don't know what's going on in Nigeria, your media sources suck. You are in a bubble. And again, I'm not a Christian, but they are systematically killing the Christians in Nigeria. They've killed over 100,000 since 2009. They've burned 18,000 churches. This is so much more. These are their Islamists, Boko Haram. This is so much more of a genocide attempt than what is going on in Gaza. They are literally attempting to wipe out the Christian population of an entire country. Where are the kids protesting this?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Because no one will talk about it, so thank you.
Absolutely.
So the question stands, why the silence? And Pastor Sam Jones addresses this very question. He explains why the silence exists, what forces shape the narrative, and why this issue is often pushed to the margins.
People, they look out and you start having conversations and people go, I haven't heard of what's happening in Nigeria. Basically, so what happens is that if an attack happens, now keep in mind the strategy of this jihad is essentially what we call death of 1,000 attacks. And so they're coming up and they're attacking little village here where you might have 20 people die. They attack another village here where 50 people might die. Then they attack another village here where 80 people might die, and then 20, and then all of a sudden here you might get one that's over 100. And if you get one that's over 100, they might go, okay, this is big enough to where we need to have a press conference and actually make a story out of it. And so they'll have a press conference. The government official will call a press conference, and then he'll give the number, which is probably less than what actually happened because they're trying to make it sound like it's not such a big deal or a big problem. And then, but let's even say they give the real numbers. Sometimes you have, a good government official, they'll come out, they'll give the real numbers, they'll be brave, and they'll speak the truth. And so they give the real numbers. Well, then what ends up happening is that this press is sent out to the Associated Press, to Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera gets it, and they might change it from, it was a Fulani ethnic militia to it was a farmer-herder conflict or unidentified bandits or something like that. And then that's what goes out to everything else. And so you maybe hear of, one out of every, 20 attacks, maybe. That's probably even low on the numbers because I can only think of 2 or 3 attacks this year that really made it that I saw get any kind of press coverage outside of Truth Nigeria. And it's one of those where you start to look out and you realize, man, we're not getting much of the news. And then the news we do get, it's sanitized, it's changed, it has an Islamic bent to it.
So, how do we find out the truth about this issue? The answer is that we must look beyond the headlines.
I think it was a famous actor, Denzel Washington, said, if you listen to the media in America, you're misinformed, and if you don't listen to them, you're uninformed. And so I think you have to be very intentional about looking for this information. There are a number of websites that I will check out. For instance, Voice of the Martyrs, their website is persecution.com. And they speak up for the persecuted church around the world, and you can get their monthly newsletter, which details persecution and how people are surviving persecution all around the world. Then you can also check out OpenDoorsUSA.com and or .org, and Open Doors USA, they chart the persecution that's going on around the world as well. We've already mentioned the US State Department Commission on International Religious Freedom. Anybody can download that report for themselves, and I'd encourage everybody to download those reports and read it for themselves. So those are sources in the media. If you're going to find more first-hand accounts of persecution, we live in a very diverse country here in America. And what I found as a pastor was that we would do something in church because many of our members didn't know each other. So I would ask people to stand up at the front. They could prepare for it a week in advance. And I would ask them 4 questions. What is your name? Where were you born? How did you come to America? And how did you come to know Jesus? And the last question was, what can we be praying for? And what I found during that process in my churches was that people would stand up, and they're often people who are sitting quietly in the back of the church, and they never have much to say, it seems, and they're never asked to stand at the front, and they never voted into any leadership position. But when they stood up at the front of the church, we heard stories about surviving persecution from Guatemala and Somalia and Afghanistan, and from the former Soviet Union, and so forth, and from China. And so within many of our churches in North America, particularly within our churches where there's a large refugee and immigrant community within our congregations, I would encourage Adventists who are watching this to take the time and get to know our refugee and immigrant communities within our Adventist congregations, and just ask them to tell you their story. And they will tell stories of incredible fortitude and courage and faith under the most painful persecution. And so we have victims of persecution within our own congregations. We often just turn a blind eye to them because they're not in the in-group. They tend to be on the periphery of the congregation. And then something else, there are some aid agencies out there who work for the needs of the persecuted, but they will generally describe things in non-sectarian terms. So if you were to listen to Oxfam, for instance, or the International Committee for the Red Cross, ICRC, they will describe conflict, but they will almost never describe it in religious terms. They may describe it as a dispute between nomadic peoples and pastoralist peoples, between those who are farming and those who are herding. They may describe conflict in those terms or in terms of ethnicity, but they will almost never describe it in terms of religious persecution. So there are a number of ways you can learn more about the persecuted church. And if you serve on a mission trip anywhere, get to know the local members, listen to their stories, and in many parts of the world they will tell you stories of inter-ethnic rivalry, tribal violence, and religious persecution. They won't say it in front of everybody because they're afraid of repercussions locally, but they will tell you in private the things that they have been going through.
One question remains. How should Christians respond to the flood of information surrounding this issue? Dr. Conrad Vine offers a clear answer.
If you're facing persecution from non-state actors, then theoretically the government has an obligation to protect you. And highlighting the case in the international media is one way often of shaming governments into providing protection for people who they really don't care for and who would otherwise never protect. So international exposure and shining the light of transparency onto a matter is very important. And if you're facing persecution from the government, you can try and flee to another country because it's, you're not going to fight to overturn the government, for instance. So generally, you're going to try and escape, and you may become a refugee to another country where you can practice your faith in freedom without fear of physical persecution. Those have been the standard Christian responses over the years. And what we see happening in Nigeria is a relatively weak central government that is unable to stop the low-level jihad that is being waged over many years now. And so now the case has been highlighted in the international media by President Trump. And I'm hoping and praying that will force or shame the Nigerian government into offering more meaningful protection and trying to resolve this conflict rather than just allow the conflict to go on like an open wound within the country of Nigeria. So there are various options for Christians. And I think that what we're talking about as persecution of Christians as a whole is different to if somebody attacks you in the street and asks you for your wallet. Okay, and I think that we must avoid conflating these issues. If you are attacked as a community for bearing the name of Christ, the preferable option is to seek relief in another country or city if possible. However, when I talk about the biblical right to self-defense, I'm primarily talking about if somebody breaks into your house tonight and puts a knife to your throat and wants to rape your wife, what are you going to do? And you have the right to push back in any way. And I believe absolutely you actually have a responsibility to defend those whom God has entrusted to you. So I think that it's imperative upon us as Christians in the West to listen to the stories of the persecuted church, such as from Nigeria. We've seen the videos of the Nigerian pastor standing in the mass graves where all the Christians are being buried and crying out for the US Senate and US government to intervene. And that pastor is doing what he can. He's appealing, he's making the issue go global. He's putting it on social media. He's raising awareness and understanding of the issue. And because he's raising the issue, it can no longer be ignored by the international community. And I commend that pastor for what he's doing.
To our brothers and sisters of the persecuted church, be strong in the Lord. Your faith is not in vain, and your reward is sure. Jesus himself spoke these words. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely. For my sake rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. You are not forgotten, heaven sees, and so do we. Heaven records, and Christ himself walks with you in the fire. Stay faithful till the end. Your victory and your deliverance is sure to come. If you'd like to support what we're doing here, please subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. Like, share, and subscribe, not for algorithms, but to stand for the truth. Thank you, and God bless you.